Good afternoon, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather, and I hope you're having a good Tuesday, all things considered. We are tracking the threat for a potential system in the Gulf of Mexico over the next 7 days, and a slow-moving one that's going to cause some forecasting headaches. I will be honest with you all. Things have not become a lot clearer today. It looked like they might. They haven't, but I am still going to keep eyes on it for you and talk about what's going on, what we can expect, especially for those of you watching from Florida and the rest of the Southeast. And we're also going to talk about the potential for two major hurricanes farther out in the Atlantic and maybe some more storms on the horizon. So thank you for joining me today. This is what we're tracking here, a developing Gulf system, and it may actually come in two pieces here as we have moisture continuing to move out of the Caribbean into the southern Gulf. Now, for the time being, we're in pretty good shape on the Gulf Coast. You may see models that have been shared by others over the last few days that look a lot more daunting. I will tell you right now that my goal here is to get you prepared for what is showing up on the forecast, but we're not going to go worst case scenario on everything. As I have learned as a meteorologist for over 20 years, things don't always play out that way, although we did see that with Helene. This is not another Helene, okay? That is the good news, but the bad news is that it is certainly something that can produce quite a bit of rainfall. This is the area we're tracking here. It's got a 40% chance of development. And you can see the National Hurricane Center is urging those of you that are on the Gulf Coast to continue to monitor the system. It is still a potential threat, but right now it is not developing very quickly, which is good news. We also have Tropical Storm Kirk, which is expected to become a hurricane by tonight, and another system, which is Invest 91L, expected to become a tropical depression here in the next day or two, and maybe our next tropical storm, Leslie, and possibly even a hurricane after that. Here is a look at the satellite imagery right now across the tropics. This is what's left of Joyce, no longer has a circulation. The remains of Isaac way up here. This is soon-to-be Hurricane Kirk, and this is Invest 91L, which will probably be Leslie. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about what's going on across this area as it's a lot closer to land, as we have kind of two features involved within this greater circulation in here, both of which have eyes on the Gulf of Mexico, albeit nothing's going to be moving very quickly. We also could see development on the Pacific side here as well as our gyre remains active. So regardless, there is a ton of moisture down here that eventually has to move somewhere, and it does look like it could head back up into the northeastern Gulf and maybe even Louisiana and the Texas coast here over the next few days. So right now, here are the remains of Helene. There's an upper level low, which will track back out over water. We may see a weak storm form near Bermuda. I don't think it's going to get the name Helene again, but some of that moisture is still there. We do have southwesterly flow moving up outside of this trough here into Georgia and Florida, so we're going to have some wet weather across portions of central Florida. We do have an upper level low here spinning to the west of Jamaica. That is going to cross the Yucatan and move into the southern Gulf. And we have behind that a tropical wave in the southwest Caribbean that I'll show you here pretty soon. So nothing super crazy for the time being. Obviously, we're still tracking quite a few power outages in the southeast. Florida looks to be in better shape, but still the areas that got hit really hard, Madison, Taylor, Hamilton, Suwannee, and Dixie counties all still have significant power outages. But fortunately, we are seeing more and more folks getting their power back. It's going to take longer, though, across parts of Georgia here. Places like Clinch and Eccles County, Atkinson County, Montgomery, Jefferson, Glasscock, and Warren, and into the Augusta area. It's going to take you all probably a little bit longer to get power back. And that gets worse as we get into the areas that have more flooding across South Carolina, Laurens and Greenwood and Edgefield counties up to maybe Greenville. We still have significant people without power. And in North Carolina, a very bad situation continues in Transylvania and Henderson counties south of Asheville, which is in Buncombe County. And still most of Yancey County and Mitchell County still without power due to all the high winds and the heavy rain. Parts of southwestern Virginia as well. In particular, Russell County and Grayson County, we're getting some power back, but it's taking a long time. And in West Virginia, we do have a few power outages as well in Mercer County, McDowell, and Wyoming, just to the south of the Beckley area, as we had a lot of rain in those areas. But certainly we're getting there. It's just taking a lot more time than I think everybody would like to see. The other problem we're going to be dealing with is river flooding. As you can see here, a lot of places still in significant flood. The Santee River near Jamestown expected to get very high. the Ohoopee River near Reedsville, and still the Congaree River in the Columbia area, and the Wateree River here near Camden, South Carolina. We have river flooding as well on the Ocmulgee River and some of our rivers in southeastern Georgia. And all the rain that came out of the mountains is heading into South Carolina. So we are going to see significant river flooding there. We also have some minor flooding in eastern North Carolina, and we do have some river and bay flooding across parts of eastern Virginia and up the Chesapeake Bay as well, towards the Severn River, towards the Potomac River around Georgetown. We have a little bit of flooding, and the James River, which runs from the mountains down through Richmond and all the way down to between the peninsula and the Hampton Roads region. Excuse me, I've been fighting something here. We're doing our best. But you can see rainfall totals are going to be on the moderate side for the rest of today and tonight across eastern Virginia, across eastern North Carolina, and a little bit of rain as well across the upper Ohio Valley in Pennsylvania. But Florida is where most of the rain is going to fall here in the next few days. We're also going to see an uptick of that rain on the central Gulf Coast, Galveston and southeast Louisiana, coastal Mississippi and Alabama, and maybe to Apalachicola. We're all going to see those areas getting more and more rain. But the good news is that we're not expecting to see over time this rain to make it back up into the flooded areas. In fact, after we get past tomorrow morning, the mountains are actually going to be high and dry through the weekend. Should be a nice weekend, and we may escape any rain as well for the first portion of next week. You can see Florida gets the rain. Georgia may get a little bit of rain towards the coast and in the south, and the low country of South Carolina could see some rain, but we could actually go 7 or 8 days without rain for much of the inland areas here north of I-10 and especially up to the I-40 corridor once we get the remains of Helene to finally move out of the area. So again, I showed you this graphic a little while ago. This is a little bit more zoomed in, but you can see Kirk is really the main player on the map as what's left of Joyce is getting sheared apart here. This is the upper low west of Jamaica that may try to develop, and here is another lower level circulation south of it to the east of Nicaragua. This is the area that is highlighted by the National Hurricane Center for that 40% development, and it will follow the upper low into this general area, so it's going to head up into the same place as Helene, but the setup here is quite a bit different than what we saw with Helene. If you look a little closer, you can see here is our upper level low and producing some heavy rain across the Cayman Islands. Grand Cayman and the sister islands are right over here, and some heavier showers as well, lifting away from southern and eastern Jamaica. But you can see here in the lower levels, these low clouds are streaking from southeast to northwest. This is actually southeasterly wind shear. We did not really have much of this wind shear when we had Helene developing. It's not strong, but it's enough to obviously create some havoc in trying to get these storms to develop. We also have this boundary stretched across the southern Gulf. This is actually an area we need to keep a closer look at across the southern Gulf of Mexico and the Bay of Campeche, which is over here. Sorry for all the drawings, but right now, because of this wind shear out of the east and southeast, it's going to be tough to get something to consolidate, but I am seeing some hints on our guidance that later on in the week and towards the weekend, we may see some gradual development across this area. So the longer it sits here and stews, the better chance it has to develop. We saw that quite a bit here early in the season, back in June, when we had Alberto and Chris, albeit this is not from the gyre, this is just from a lingering boundary. But we also saw Francine form across this area. Now, I don't think we see a repeat of that, but we definitely are watching it. Very wet over the next several weeks across the Gulf, across the Florida Peninsula. A lot of you in South Florida are asking me if it's going to dry out. I think we have to go through at least the first half of October before we get into a drier period. And it may even take till after the 20th of October to see that happen across most of Florida. The farther north you get, the better chance of that happening. Here's a look at the ensemble. Let me go back in time to get you the full view here. And you can see a ridge of high pressure is going to build in across the south over the next couple of days. But that is going to be fleeting. It's going to shift east, and another trough will drop down into the south central U.S. And troughs often capture these tropical systems as they come up into the Gulf and lift them north. The problem that we're going to be seeing here is that this trough is not very strong. It's just a little bit of a little doohickey, if you want. That's the non-technical term I want to give you. But whatever's down in the Gulf there is not exactly strong. So we're going to be in an area where whatever forms is not going to have a great lane to expand and move northeast like we saw with Helene. If you remember Helene from last week, we had a strong upper level low that just drove everything quickly northward. Well, the situation here is a lot different. We have a weak trough. We have a huge ridge building here, and whatever's down here is going to try to come north, but may get caught south of this ridge and not have a great place to go. If this trough here ends up being a little bit stronger, then the lane to get it to come across Florida is going to be there. But we may have a lot of traffic in the way for that to even happen. So just that's what I'm watching for everybody here is, yes, there's a potential for a storm. Anything in the Southern Gulf this time of the year needs to be watched closely. But we're not talking about another major hurricane hitting Florida. And the folks that are sharing that, in my opinion, are not doing anybody a service at this point. The bigger problem is the rain. And you see this moisture here. It's not going anywhere. It's staying stuck over the southern and eastern Gulf. And you see we finally do get some drying as we get towards the end of next week. So we will be drier and more comfortable in the areas that got hit pretty hard. But for those of you in the southern portion of Florida, it's going to stay pretty wet right through the 11th and possibly beyond that. So where you are with respect to the front makes a world of difference. All right, let's look at the ensemble prediction here from the European. And you can see there is this area that we're watching coming into the northwestern Caribbean at the end of the week. And there's this area in the Bay of Campeche. We have kind of two separate entities here by Friday. As we get on into the weekend, it looks very likely that this area in here, which models developed a few days ago, is going to get killed off by wind shear. And this area in here is going to be the one that takes over. So we could have a 1-2 punch, but in reality, this is going to end up being Pac-Man and eating this over here. This would be potentially Milton, but again, it's a little bit of a ways off. This is next Monday. This is 6 days from today, and then Tuesday and Wednesday. And we have several ensembles that bring this across Florida, and then we have several that keep it stuck in the Gulf for quite a bit longer, taking an extended cruise here. Which is a change in what we were looking at yesterday. There were hints that that could try to happen, but today we have a lot less support for a system just racing across Florida into the Atlantic and more of a support for just a big disjointed system that's going to stick around and cause problems. Here are the ensembles from the GFS, and I've put wind shear on here. This is a new feature from weathernerds.org, and you can see here the wind shear over the northern Gulf today is actually not very bad. But there's a lot of wind shear in the Caribbean. As we move on into the end of this week, we'll see the wind shear is going to lower in the southern Gulf, but raise across the northern Gulf. So anything that tries to make it up here to the Gulf Coast is going to struggle and get killed off by this wind shear. This is next Saturday night, or this Saturday night. Now, beyond that, you will see because of the front dropping south, because of the high wind shear, we still have an avenue for this system to hang out and form. It could try to get yanked northeastward, and it may survive at that point by the middle of next week, Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe as a tropical storm, but it's a lot less likely we have a hurricane hitting Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. It's more likely we either have something stuck, and that is something we'll have to watch, or we have something weaker that heads towards the Florida Peninsula and ends up just being a big rainstorm at that point. So I really wish I could have more certainty on this. Earlier today, I posted this, and what happens? Go figure. The solutions change from this. We came to an agreement here back earlier today between the models. Now there's intensity differences. This icon's not going to happen, but you see the GFS, you see the Canadian having a tropical storm in the southern Gulf. The European hints at it. The icon too strong. Fast forward, we no longer have that agreement. If we take a look at the latest GFS, it has a storm system. Here's the first piece. It's weak, but it's there over the weekend. And then it never makes landfall. It gets back down and gets picked up by the next feature. And here we go, the middle of next week, we still have low pressure that actually gets shoved southward by the cold front. Is this going to play out this way? Probably not. We're probably going to see models again converging on Florida, but for the time being, it is backed off on that solution. Here's the Canadian, and you can see it never develops the first feature, but it does develop the second one on Sunday. And we see a weaker system that gets stuck and maybe gets sheared apart here near Cuba by the end of next week. And then the icon model from earlier, it's no longer nearly as strong, but it has the two systems here over the weekend. The first system falls apart. The second one takes over. And rather than it showing a hurricane, it's got a tropical storm hitting South Florida by next Tuesday. That, I think, is more likely. And then the European from earlier shows this weaker, broader system here developing as we get to this weekend in the Central Gulf, and sitting around and just kind of taking a little bit of a loop down here and maybe coming back up towards the Florida Keys at the end of next week. So it's very possible we have 10 more days to watch whatever tries to form here, and it may not even form. Just a very complicated setup here. Here's the European AI forecast. I zoomed it out so you could see it, but it's got a weak system here next week around this time moving across Florida. And here's another piece here. It's like it gives birth to something here over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and that heads towards Florida next weekend. So very complicated setup. The blend of all the models keeps things very wet, as you all can see, at least 5 inches of rain here in South Florida, but someone is going to get quite a bit more, and this could be shoved to the east, and we could see a foot or more of rain in places like Tampa Bay area and Sarasota and Bradenton. We could see several inches across the rest of South Florida, and if it shoves northward, we could see that across maybe the Big Bend, but certainly the Forgotten Coast and far southeastern Louisiana. Here's the GFS model, and you can see foot of rain near I-4 and 6 to 12 inches in South Florida. So it's going to be wet. So we're gonna take a closer look at that in the coming days. Farther out in the tropics, the remains of Joyce falling apart. This is Kirk. It was a depression yesterday. Fast forward here to today, and it's a growing tropical storm. It's got a little bit of wind shear, but you can see the track takes it to the northwest as a hurricane tonight, as a Category 2 hurricane tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night, and then a major Category 3 making the right turn towards the weekend. Should not be a threat to land. Here's the area behind it. Has a good chance of developing once it separates from Kirk, and we're going to have to watch that one as well. Here's a look at Kirk. Strong tropical storm. Tough to see, but there's actually a little bit of light wind shear out of the north and northwest here, but it is doing a good job of fighting that wind shear off right now. The official forecast, here we go. Hurricane here by tonight, major hurricane by Thursday night, Friday morning. Probably not rapidly intensifying like Lee did last year, but that is still an option. You can see our forecast here from Tomerberg's website for Kirk. It'll go over warm water, but it's a little too far east of the really strong amount of ocean heat content. Lee strengthened quickly when it was over here. This system is a little bit too far to the right to take advantage of that hot water, but it's in an area of pretty low wind shear, and you can see that here on the ship's model. Wind shear is significantly low here for a couple days, then it comes up a little bit. Sea surface temperature still pretty warm. Relative humidity is fairly high, and the heat content is there for this to strengthen. And so I think Category 3 is a reasonable forecast. We have a little bit of a hint that it could even try to get up to Category 4. So we will have to see on that. But again, it's a fish storm at this point. The system behind it, we're going to have to keep an eye on as well. You see Kirk right here, but take a look at this one. The GFS is very aggressive. The good news is that a storm that strengthens quickly like that would recurve as well. And it could be a stronger hurricane. This would be Leslie. But the GFS is not the only model out there that's tracking this system. And I'll show you a difference here in a little bit. See, here's the GFS following Kirk. And then that's about it. The main development region shuts down after these next two. If we take a look at the European here from earlier, you will see Kirk here. You'll see Leslie. And Leslie is strengthening a little bit closer to the islands, but not getting close enough. But the European AI forecast, whoops, I already gave it away, shows this system taking longer to develop. And as a result, there'll be an area of high pressure that gets in between these two and allows us to go on a more southerly track. And if this is correct, we may have a hurricane threat for the islands. It's a little early to make a forecast. Right now, I think this is probably going to end up adjusting to the north and east, but we're going to have to watch closely later next week across the Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. Eventually, this is going to get turned away, and it should not be a threat to the U.S. Finally, we've got Typhoon Krathon, and that is southwest of Taiwan. It was a super typhoon, weakening just a little bit today. You can see the track took it all the way across the strait between Luzon in the Philippines and Taiwan, right over these islands, a devastating storm. Fast forward today, and you can see the track of the storm is moving southwest of Taiwan, but is expected to turn to the right. And it could come right over places like Tainan as a stronger typhoon here tomorrow night, or it may try to avoid and just scrape the coast and move up through the Taiwan Strait. Here is the satellite image, and you can see it has weakened just a little bit, but still a very powerful storm to the south and west of Taiwan. Here's a look at the radar, and right now just flirting with the southwest coast, but we do see the models showing us kind of some mixed signals here over the forecast period. And if you take a look at the ensembles, they're not all in agreement that this ends up going by and across Taiwan and falling apart. Several are trying to turn it back to the west towards China, which is where the last several have gone. So very difficult forecast. It will weaken, but it could still be a very hazardous storm for Taiwan. And you can see the latest HAVS model shows a very deep system through tonight, then some weakening. So that's some good news. This particular run takes it just west of Taiwan, very close to South China, and then falls apart after that. So I'll monitor for you all, but this is an evolving situation for those in Taiwan, obviously. And a lot of rain coming and a lot of flooding for them as well. But as always, I really appreciate y'all's time today. Thank you for trusting me. And if you are new here, I would love it if you could become a subscriber, to like and share with your friends. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm pretty busy, so I may not get to those right away. But I do ask that you remain respectful here. I'm here to educate you all. You may not agree with everything that I say, but let's respect each other, especially after what's happened here with Hurricane Helene. The world could use people that can do their best to love each other and get along with each other. And I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has given me this love and this assignment to help you all as a meteorologist. And he is the light in a dark world. John 16:33 says, Paul tells the church, or John tells us, sorry, not Paul. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And I got that wrong. It's definitely not Paul, definitely not John. That's what Jesus told us, that Jesus has overcome the darkness in the world. And the good news is that even though it's dark, even though we are going through just incredibly bad weather, incredibly bad situations, election season, whatever else we're going through, there's still lightness. There's still light out there to overcome this darkness. And that is Jesus Christ. And that's what I truly believe. And I hope that you're blessed in the way that I am, and that you see that there's the opportunity for you to accept Jesus as your Savior so that you can live eternally with him. Because living in darkness it's no fun. And I did it for 30 years of my life, believe me. I'm still struggling, but I am growing as a Christian. And one of the main things that I've learned as I grow is that Jesus took care of everybody but himself. And to model him, that means we all need to be a lot less selfish and a lot more selfless. So if you have any prayer requests, I am happy to pray for you today. Feel free to list those, and I will spend time in prayer. And I will be back on here after lunch tomorrow. Hope you have a blessed day. See ya.